All right, welcome to another episode of Grand Reckoning. We have one of our favorite guests, the great Dave DeCamp, fresh off of Matt Gates episode. So you guys should check that out as well. That should be hitting the streets soon. We had you on because a lot has gone on. I would say, to put it mildly, the shit has hit the fan. We have Venezuela going crazy. It seems like under the cover of the shit hitting the fan, Gaza has been escalating, as well as Iran protests coming off and a lot of threats from the administration to go off there. So we wanted to get your 2 cents on what's going on. So, like, what do you think is going on here? Is this like a flooding the zone, but for war?
Yeah, well, it kind of seems like it. I mean, if you saw Ben Shapiro's take after the attack on Venezuela, he wrote this op-ed. I think he might have said it on his show too, that Trump has kicked the Iraq War syndrome, basically the aversion to foreign interventions that Americans have with this attack on Venezuela and his previous war with Iran that didn't last very long. And I think that is what, part of this, a big part of the strategy here from Trump. He wants to make military intervention great again, popular again, because he seems to, be ready to resort to it. And I think he's kind of riding high, and he thinks he could really, especially after that Venezuela attack. I mean, it was a brutal attack. Dozens of people, 80 to 100 people were killed, but no American soldiers were killed. So from his point of view and from many of his supporters' point of view, it was a total success because of that. Even though the same government is still in place and now, he's doing business with them. Seems like he could have saved a lot of trouble by just doing business with Maduro if that's what he wanted. But yeah, I mean, and you see Trump the other day talk about the $1.5 trillion military budget that he wants for 2026. So I think he's really kind of just leaning into the whole American empire thing and just going for it, And with Iran, I mean, there's so much to it to kind of talk about. But kind of the striking thing to me about all this is that, you had Netanyahu come visit Mar-a-Lago and the whole thing was, oh, Netanyahu's going to try to convince Trump to support another war. But even before they sat down for their meeting, Trump said, yeah, well, we'll attack Iran again, whatever. And he cited their conventional missiles, not their nuclear program. So he shifted the pretext. And then I think it was just a few days after that he said he would bomb them if they were killing protesters. So another pretext has been shifted yet again. And now, we're in the position, we're recording this Wednesday night. All the indications today are that some sort of U.S. attack is coming, although now Trump is saying that he heard the killing in Iran stopped. I don't know if that's a head fake or if he is actually backing down. Maybe he's realized that there's not really much he could actually do to help the Iranians by bombing the country. But one thing that I think is interesting is that the indication is that this is going to be a U.S. attack, not an Israeli attack. A U.S.-led attack here. I mean, Israel's kind of, they haven't really been saying too much. And I think it is Israel's wish to get the U.S. and Iran in a direct confrontation, for a few reasons. One of them, connecting things is that it would take eyes off Gaza, which there already relatively has not been much attention on Gaza. And, of course, they want their regime change in Iran. They want to sink that country into further chaos. So anyway, that's my take on some of the things.
Yeah. So
What's your take on Greenland and this whole thing with that?
The Greenland thing doesn't make any sense practically. And there's something about it. It's like seeing people like J.D. Vance and others in the administration kind of line up to say, oh, yeah, we need Greenland. We got to have it. Even though the U.S. has a military base there under their treaty. I mean, as far as I understand it, the U.S. can basically build as many bases as they want in Greenland. I mean, it's a huge landmass with a very small population. It's in NATO. So the claim is, oh, if we don't take it, Russia and China are going to take it. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I think Trump really wants, as I said, like he's embracing the empire and he wants territorial expansion. And he's like looking at himself right now as some, he's getting Venezuela to pay its tributes to the U.S. Like, I think he's just saying, all right, let's just be openly, be an empire. And I think it's, he did that interview with the New York Times. He said, what's the limit on what you can do? And he said, oh, it's my own moral authority, which, for me as a Catholic, as a Christian, that's like the Bible is pretty clear about that. That's a very
Right.
dangerous way to think that you're the final
Very
say.
Thanos.
Yeah, it's very just unsettling. Anyway, it's just, I think it's Trump's idea, and people are just going along with it in his administration. And there's polling today. It is extremely unpopular among Americans, according to the polls. Something like 86% oppose a U.S. military takeover of Greenland.
So there are reasons that for Trump to do an operation in Greenland that people aren't really talking about much. I talked to an expert on resources, and they told me that the only reason to invade Greenland, and it's a good one, is their rare earth deposits. So currently, China owns 60% of the rare earth deposits in the world and has 90% of the processing. That could really change if Greenland is taken over. Greenland has 36 million tons of reserves of rare earth, and China altogether has 44 million. So this could really change the picture. And that's why this person I was talking to believes that Greenland will be the next target for the United States and not any of the others. And that sort of fits with that kind of resource war element that we've seen in Venezuela. It's similarly not thought out. So in Venezuela, we saw, as I'm sure you can tell us more about this, that the oil companies don't particularly want to go in there because it's not stable. Greenland, their deposits of rare earth are difficult to access, and it's not high quality, but it's still very significant. And that seems to be the reason why. And I think also that Trump could sell this better to his population by just focusing on the resources. I think there's a certain element in every American that's like, hell yeah, these resources belong to us. We can go in and take them. That works a lot better than we're going to promote democracy. That works a lot better than all these excuses. I think I saw some signs of that when he talked about the oil, that people appreciated the candor of it. And I think he could do the same with Greenland. I just don't know if he has the message discipline to do that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a factor. But I mean, do you know, is Greenland against mining these minerals? Like, is there a reason why American companies couldn't get in there without the U.S. taking over the country? I mean, I guess the argument would be like to have direct control of it and total say in how everything is, how everything goes.
Greenland is willing, or Denmark and Greenland are willing to negotiate with American companies over having a part of the rights there under certain circumstances that wouldn't interfere with, wildlife and the Inuit population, common sense stuff, and to give fair shake to other companies in the world for the rights. That's not what Trump is looking for. Trump is looking for not only complete domination, but also the propaganda element of planting the flag and bullying other countries. I think is very important here. And I think also, tell me what you think, distracting from the Epstein files, which were really dragging on his popularity at home.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's like the master distractor. That's why, because, we're at kind of a different point now, post U.S. attack on Venezuela, post 12-day war. Because a lot of times people thought Trump would make these threats to attack other countries, and it was a bluff to like make a deal. It was art of the deal, like he did with Kim in the first administration, the fire and fury threat. But now we know that he is willing to follow through on these threats. But at the same time, it is a tactic that he has. He makes wild claims and threats and to distract people, to throw people off. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know what they're going to do next. I know they had a meeting today. The Danish foreign minister and the foreign minister from Greenland met with Vance and Rubio, and apparently they didn't solve anything. They said they're still very far apart on the whole thing. So I don't know where this is going to go.
Yeah, I heard they tried to bully them into submission, and they haven't agreed to be bullied into submission. But I don't know if they can really stand up if Trump is truly serious about it.
Yeah, I mean, like a U.S. if the U.S. wanted to seize Greenland, I think they would probably be able to do it pretty easily. I mean, is NATO going to intervene, or is the U.K. and France going to come to the rescue? Like, seriously, what would happen?
Either way, it's the end of NATO as we know it, whether they resist or not.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a future for NATO, do you think, if that happens?
I mean, that's the only appealing reason that I could think of, is that there probably is no future for NATO if they attack a NATO country. I mean, or it would be NATO without the U.S., which wouldn't really be
Wouldn't
much.
be NATO.
Yeah.
It would
But
be a
yeah,
European
you think,
defense
yeah.
treaty.
Or would they, they might be so pathetic that they would kind of just go, oh, okay, all right, I guess we'll keep doing NATO anyway. Because
That's the end of NATO in its own way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
What do you think is coming next in Iran? It looks like Trump doesn't have any really good options. You mentioned that Israel's not very enthusiastic about this attack right now, and that's exactly right. They want an attack in Iran, but they don't want an attack at this moment because they think that the regime is going to survive it and it'll create a rally around the flag effect that'll actually strengthen them. Meanwhile, the Arab states are, and that's probably more important in the considerations of Trump right now, don't want an attack at all, or are very hesitant to see an attack because they're worried that Iran will collapse and they'll have to deal with the fallout of that in terms of refugees, nuclear weapons, terrorism, and all that. So what do you think Trump's going to do when you consider all that?
yeah, I mean, so right now there's reports that Trump feels obligated to attack because of his own threats, because of all. I mean, it's been multiple times now in the past couple weeks that he said he's going to hit them. So it's hard to imagine that. If is he going to go just for some limited symbolic attack like on Iran's security forces and try to call it a day? Or is he going to try to go big? Because, I mean, I think if the purpose of the attack would be to decapitate the regime, I mean, it would need to be a big attack. Like, it would need to be a major U.S. airstrikes, probably for days and maybe weeks. And I don't think that the U.S. doesn't really have forces positioned in the region for that. And of course, then they have to worry about the Iranian counterattacks, which seems like they could be pretty significant. That's the thing. Like, could this be Trump launches some missiles at an IRGC base somewhere in Iran, and then Iran launches a few missiles at a U.S. base and they call it a day? I guess that's possible, but I do think from the viewpoint of the Iranian government, if you see all these threats, it's clear that deterrence was not established if the U.S. attacks again during the 12-day war. And what did they do then? They said they gave the U.S. basically, like, I don't know exactly how much notice, but they gave them significant warning that they were going to target the Al Udeid air base in Qatar, and they gave them time to evacuate and prepare to intercept the missiles. So is it going to be like choreographed like that again? I think there's a lot of reason to think that it's not, that they might go for something bigger. But at the same time, if they think they can keep it limited, they might just go with that. Because it's just hard to imagine like Trump sending in the B-2s to like carpet bomb Tehran, or what it would take to destroy the regime. And of course, a lot of innocent Iranians would be killed in the process. But so I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. Like, this position Trump has put himself in here.
Well, I think that the comments that Trump made, that they're canceling the executions and all that, were very telling. He said he got it from a very important source on the other side, probably directly from Khamenei. And that probably gives you some indication of the kind of deal that we're going to see. I heard from an Israeli intelligence source that the slaughtering that's been going on in Iran has not broken the back of the demonstrations, but really slowed them down and almost crushed the will to resist in the short term. They're expecting the demonstrations to be lower in the short term. So maybe the regime can afford to stop the executions, lower the level of repression, and in exchange, either not have a Trump attack or, like you said, have a choreographed attack. I'm betting on a choreographed attack so that Trump doesn't have to back down and look weak. And then Iran can attack back. That's what I'm betting will happen. And then Trump can say, with a degree of truth to it, that he managed to get some of the worst repression to stop, albeit temporarily.
Yeah, I think that's possible. As I said, I just can't imagine like the major airstrikes at this point, but you also never know. There's a lot of deception could be at play here, like there was during the previous war, the 12-day. I keep calling it the 12-day war. I kind of don't like that name, but I guess that's what people are calling it. Yeah, it did stick. But yeah, if you remember, did I say this already? I'm a little tired today, but before the 12-day war started, Trump put that post on Truth Social that he was committed to diplomacy with Iran. And then like 3 hours later, Israel started bombing Iran. And, you never know. It's like it could be like PSYOP on top of PSYOP. If you remember in the days and weeks leading up, there was all these reports about Netanyahu and Trump being at odds. Trump didn't want war. He wanted to give negotiations time to breathe. And then after the war started, then there was all these reports. Oh, that was all a deception campaign. It was all choreographed. And I'm inclined to believe that the decision was made, because that's what we heard at the time, that the decision was made kind of, I don't know how long before the war started, but it was pretty much already made when it started that the U.S. would intervene to take out the nuclear facilities at least. And potentially they were considering going for regime change if they saw the opportunity. So I think that's just important to keep in mind, this possible deception and psyops that are happening.
Couldn't agree more. As someone who's studied strategy and all that, the thing that impresses me most about Trump, and there's very few things that impress me about Trump, is his ability to fake out, his understanding of the importance of strategic surprise, his understanding either on probably not on a theoretical level as much as on an instinctive level of the whole madman theory of the enemy not knowing what your next step will be and what your considerations are. Those things are invaluable in warfare, and he's better at it than any other president I've ever seen, and that's very impressive. The follow-through and the strategy, that's where he's very bad, and that's just as important. And that brings me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. Everyone is talking about Iran now, but what on earth is happening in Venezuela? What's the follow-through on that? Where are the internal politics there? What are the negotiations at? What's happening there?
Isn't it interesting how, like, less than 2 weeks ago, Trump launched this major attack on Venezuela's capital, and now nobody's talking about it? Like, you talk about he's the master distractor, but yeah, so what is going on in Venezuela? I mean, the whole thing, and that's, another thing you talk about Trump not choreographing his next move. I mean, in the months leading up to that, nobody had any idea what was happening, what was going to happen. And I didn't know that was really an option. I remember there was reports that like one of their options they were considering was sending in a special operations team to capture or kill Maduro. I didn't think that they could actually pull it off like that. And according to Trump himself, it almost failed. It came close because one helicopter was hit. It could have been a total disaster, but they were able to do it. But then, of course, after that, Trump says we're going to run Venezuela. So what does that mean? Well, it turns out it means he's basically going to threaten the government into allowing him to control their oil resources. And he said, he had this whole plan. American oil companies are going to get in there, rebuild everything, get their money back that they lost. Obviously the way he frames it and talks about it is completely wrong. The idea that the U.S. is owed oil or like land. Basically, American oil companies, some of their assets were expropriated by the Chavez government. I mean, they say that they owe him like a few $1 billion, depending on the company. But anyway, so he has this whole idea, and then he hosts these oil executives at the White House, and he doesn't get a single commitment for investment. And the Exxon guy calls Venezuela uninvestable. So like his whole rationale for the war is just kind of out the window after that. The only company that seemed ready to do something was Chevron, because Chevron cut a deal with Chavez. They accepted his terms and continued to operate in Venezuela. And Trump, even amid all the escalations, extended this license, allowing them to keep pumping oil in Venezuela. So they're still working in Venezuela, and they're saying that they can increase production, in a big way. If more sanctions are lifted. I forget, there was another company there. Trump was asking them all, like, when were you forced out of Venezuela? And one of them said, man, I wish I remember which company, but they said 2019 when you imposed oil sanctions on Venezuela. So, the whole thing, it's like he literally could have, to achieve what seems to be happening or potentially happening, he could have just lifted sanctions. And it's funny now because the pro-regime change people aren't happy with the result of this, because the same government is in power. Literally, Delcy Rodriguez has been an ally of Maduro for decades, and the interior minister and is another one under U.S. sanctions with a U.S. bounty on his head. The only reason Rodriguez isn't under those same, maybe she's under sanctions, but she doesn't have a bounty, because she's also served as the oil minister. So she's the one that Chevron deals with. And that's apparently why they decided they could work with her, because she has a history of working with U.S. companies. So we're just in this weird position now where, I mean, Trump is basically telling the country to capitulate. He was threatening, he essentially threatened to kill Rodriguez. That's how I took it. He said that if she doesn't cooperate, it'll be worse for her than Maduro, which Maduro's in a jail cell. What's worse than that? I mean, killing someone. It's obviously the threat that he was making, and he was threatening to attack them again. He seems to have backed down. He said something along those lines when they started releasing some political prisoners. So we're in this weird moment where the same government is in power. You see their rhetoric, they're trying to be defiant, but also talking to Trump just today. Rodriguez and Trump spoke on the phone. They both said, it was a great call. Everything's great, but she's still calling for Maduro to be released. So who knows what's going to happen moving forward? And also, as far as I could tell, because there was questions about that U.S. attack on Venezuela, if there was cooperation from within the Venezuelan military or if Rodriguez herself cooperated, but we haven't seen any kind of indication of like infighting, of them closing ranks within the Venezuelan government. They've been kind of maintaining at least a front of unity. There's always the possibility that some people within that government might not be happy about the way Rodriguez is handling this, kind of could be seen as capitulating to the U.S., or people within Venezuela, movements within Venezuela, the Chavistas, or even, there's also the possibility of the armed groups that control the border, the ELN and FARC, trying to capitalize on this to gain more territory and maybe launch an insurgency or something. But still haven't seen anything like that. As far as we can tell, the country's relatively stable at the moment, but it's just like I don't know where this is going to go.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of talk about
what has
Cabello.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I'm sorry. What has actually changed? Because it seems like you have the same company, it's Chevron, still operating there. Like no new companies are going in. Basically, like you said, it seems like everything that has been achieved could have been achieved by just removing the sanctions, as you said. So I'm wondering, like, is there anything like, because they were telling her to capitulate or they're going to kill her. It's like, what have they got from her?
I mean, as far as I could tell, they got a few million, 10 million or 30 million barrels of oil that they agreed to sell to the U.S. basically, or they agreed to, I don't know exactly how it's going to work because it's not really clear. The Venezuelan government is basically saying it's a similar deal like they do with Chevron. The U.S. is going to like control the funds, and they can only be spent in a certain way. And Trump says, we're going to use that to help the Venezuelan people. So I don't know, like, I don't know what the U.S. has gotten out of it at this point at all. And, another thing that the oil companies
deal then.
Yeah. And another thing that the oil companies are basically saying is like the time that it's going to take to go in there, invest, rebuild Venezuela's oil industry. By the time they start seeing any kind of revenue or profits, Trump's going to be gone. Someone else is going to be in office. So they want guarantees, but he might not even be around. I don't know. It's just what is going to happen in the future. We might see another push for another attack. Some elements, Marco Rubio might try to find a way to take out Rodriguez, to go for another attack. I think that's a possibility, but who knows?
But why would they? She seems to be a pretty useful and reliable ally, unless she's pushed against them or.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, they seem to be happy with her, and she seems to be cooperating enough to satisfy them. But, for Rubio, like the driving force behind this, the political faction in the U.S., the Cubans and Venezuelan immigrants and their children, they hate the Chavistas and this government, and they don't want them in power. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It doesn't really matter if they're going to cooperate. I mean, according to Trump, Maduro offered everything. Maduro is ready to cooperate on everything. So I think we're going to see a push from those same people for something more here.
That brings us to a very important question regarding what's motivating all this aggression. We have, on the one hand, we have the Marco Rubio neocon school, which people forget sometimes not that Rubio is so powerful. He's Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. No one since Kissinger has had that kind of power institutionally, at least on paper, on American foreign policy, and he's a neocon. And then on the other hand, you have Stephen Miller acting as if this is the 19th century in terms of imperialism and resources. So what's motivating this? What's the logic behind all these moves? And are those two conceptions at odds? Are these two factions fighting each other?
As far as I can tell, they've been allied on this push. Stephen Miller and Marco Rubio, and they are the two that we're seeing as the driving force behind this within the administration. And so I do think it is that. I think it's the Florida political faction of these expats and immigrants and everything that I think that's really what pushed this. And I think the oil was an afterthought. But then there is the Monroe Doctrine, this attitude of the Trump administration. It kind of works well with that, and that's their big thing here. Basically, we can do whatever we want. We're gonna, take what we want, subordinate other countries in our hemisphere, and that seems to be their attitude. And I do think that they probably want to try to do something with Cuba eventually, because Trump was saying, "Oh, Cuba's gonna fall. We don't have to worry about them. They're done." I mean, they've been saying that for how long about Cuba? And I could see Rubio or somebody convincing Trump and be like, look how close, Cuba's right there. It's like right off our coast. How can we not, we could just go in there and grab the president, can't we?
It means something to him. He's old. Castro means something to him that it doesn't mean to us.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't mean to people younger than us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. And so Trump could be seen, as the hero who, liberates Cuba. And, this is the way I could see them selling it in Florida. The fact that the attack on Venezuela, Trump was in Florida, in Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago. That was where he ran that operation from. It's very symbolic, I think. We have a Florida-occupied government.
Never heard that theory before, but it's very good. It's very good.
I think it was Brad Pierce is trying to coin, the Don Road illusion.
Economist.
Brad Pierce is trying to coin Florida man-occupied government. I think it's a little too clunky. I just like Florida-occupied government.
We love Brad Pierce on this podcast.
That is such a great piece, too, by the way. Check it out,
yeah,
The Wayward Traveler. It is an excellent piece.
Yeah, because he gets into how our system is set up, that like these types of groups of, ethnic groups, migrants, how they can get together and lobby in a powerful way. Especially Florida used to be more when it was like a real battleground state. I mean, that was why Biden kept all the sanctions on Cuba. It was literally what Democratic strategists said. It's because they want to try to get votes in Miami-Dade County. It's the only reason why. So, yeah, it has a lot of influence. And think about how many people in the administration are from Florida. Pam Bondi. Let's see, who else? Rubio, of course. I mean, Trump is from New York, but he's Florida. His little kingdom is in Florida.
Right.
And I mean, New York and Florida. I'm from New York. When you get old, you become a Florida person. But it's just
Susie Wiles also.
That's right. Yeah, there's more. Yeah, Susie Wiles. There's more. I can't think of them now, but there's definitely more. I think
not to mention Ivanka and Jared.
Yeah, I think they count. The Treasury Secretary, I think, is Florida. Yeah, and you hear Trump say, I forget, I think it was Politico, he did an interview. He was asked, why are you going to attack Venezuela? This was before it happened. And you know what he said? Was because the people at this club that he owns in a part of Miami where there's a lot of Venezuelans are very nice to him. He said, I want the Venezuelan people to do good. They're very nice to me. And he was talking about Cuba in some other interview, or, he does so many interviews and posts so many things. I always forget where exactly he said certain things, but he was talking about Cuba recently, and he said, someone said, so you want to do something to Cuba? And he said, oh yeah, there's a lot of Cubans in the U.S. They're great people, and they want us to take care of that for them. So he literally says it, that this is for people he knows in Florida.
But take that with a grain of salt. I've heard him say that about a lot of groups. I love the blacks. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And the Jews, as long as they're not liberal.
That's kind of a play-through issue that it seems a lot of people don't understand the difference between diaspora peoples and the actual people within the regime. This is a lesson we learned the hard way in the Bay of Pigs invasion, is that just because the people that left the regime really don't like them doesn't mean the people who were there don't like them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't mean the people that are there, kind of regardless what they think of them, want foreign intervention to overthrow them.
And we're seeing that with Iran as well. We have a group of monarchists in the Iranian diaspora. In the city I live in, LA, is overrun with these characters, and they keep talking about returning to the great days of freedom under the Shah, which raises a lot of questions about their historical knowledge. Yeah,
And then you also have the MEK on the other side. I forget what they have, like an official name, like the National Council for the Resistance in Iran or something. But they have a history of terror attacks inside Iran and everything. It's like, but they're very influential because they have a lot of money and they pay U.S. politicians, and they're totally against the Shah and the monarchy. So you kind of see these spats between them. Like Rudy Giuliani occasionally always tweets that the Shah's son is illegitimate and he's a joke. And if you see kind of a random American politician tweet something like that, it's probably a post paid for by the MEK. But these are not, neither of them are viable options to can't fly them into Tehran and put them in power.
there's no viable alternative to the Islamic regime, which is horrifying, but it's true. And everyone I talk to says that. That's why there's so much hesitation to do a regime change. Literally, no one I talk to wants them to stay in power, but no one knows what to replace them with. And that means, what do we end up with? Most likely another Libya, most likely another Syria. In fact, worse than Syria, because Syria at least has this government. More like Libya.
Yeah. And
A
Syria,
nuclear
I mean,
threshold situation hanging in as a hot potato in a balance.
Exactly.
well, yeah, who's really sitting pretty right now is Kim Jong-un over in North Korea. I mean, it's like, can he be more vindicated after Venezuela now, after potentially another war with Iran?
What was Iran thinking not developing nuclear weapons?
Yeah.
Honestly, I was wondering that 15 years ago already. Not because I want them to, just because,
I think now the
Oh, the
fact is
thing
that
about
they
it
know
is
that they'll get
if
bombed.
they even if they did, they couldn't use it. It's a mutually assured destruction weapon in the Middle East. You're nuking everybody if you nuke one person. The way the weather patterns work, from what I understand.
I mean, it's managed to, like Dave said, it seems to have done a lot to save North Korea's ass. And you could claim it would do the same. It's true that North Korea has the backing of China, but Iran kind of has the backing of Russia. They'd be in a similar position. It'd be much harder to bully them. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, they've known for the past few decades that if they took that step to actually try to make a nuclear weapon, that they would immediately be bombed by the U.S.
There's a solution to that too. You just keep ambiguity the way that Israel has,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
Kick out.
may or may not have a nuclear weapon. There's no
Yeah,
way of
but
telling.
Israel's
There's no
gonna
way of knowing.
snitch. Mossad runs rampant through Iran. Let's be
Yeah, I
honest.
think they know that the U.S. and Israel are aware of like what's going on.
Just deny it.
Some of the Mossad attacks in Iran, like I forget what year. It was during the Biden administration. At Natanz, there was an explosion that the Mossad set off, and according to Israeli media, it was like the foundation. They got explosives put into the marble foundation of the building, which of like this deep underground nuclear facility, which is just crazy. And who did they kill there? The Hamas guy.
Yeah,
What was
head
his
of
name?
Hamas.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name, but yeah, he was in the
Hania.
IRGC's like
Ismail
guest.
Hania.
Yeah, yeah, in the
Yeah.
IRGC like guest house. They got him there. So, I thought they might have spent a lot of their intel capabilities during the 12-day war, but I'm sure they still have some tricks up their sleeve.
It's super easy to penetrate that regime, I'm told, because it's so unpopular. And because Iran is so poor right now. So the combination of lack of popularity and lack of funds makes it very easy to penetrate. And their security system is massive. They have so many people involved at every level, very inefficient, partially in order to keep, this kind of loyalty that's keeping them in power right now. So they spread it far and wide, which means there's a lot of people getting paid not that much who are not ideologically committed, and so Israel
Yeah,
and the not to mention that every single intelligence service in the Middle East and in the West is trying to penetrate them. It's a very bad recipe for them. So they have from what I understand, their capabilities are undiminished. Whatever they burned has been replaced. New things have been established, and the fact that the regime is becoming even less popular and even poorer now creates new opportunities, I'm sure. And that's why Iran is that's one of the reasons Iran is terrified and is making a lot of concessions. Uh, they keep acting very meek. You know, they're saying we're willing to talk, we're willing to do this, which is not how they were a few years ago. They would be telling everyone to fuck off to every demand, and now they're not. And yeah, that's one of the reasons they're completely penetrated.
Yeah, I mean, even the fact that they've entertained the idea of talking after the war, after they were attacked during the negotiations, definitely does show something there.
They didn't used to be like that.
You look at the U.S. and Israeli demands, I still don't like. There's no way Iran's going to agree to a deal where they limit their ballistic missiles. Like that's just not. That's all they got. Like it's not going to happen.
I truly think like the 12-day war was existential for the both of them. Like if you look at Israel being put on a true back foot, I do think they're throwing the Samson off option, even knowing that those winds are going to blow over, because at that point they're so saturated and there really isn't much, because they were at the point where they were picking and choosing. Trump is saying, hey, I've already given you 25% of our THAADs. We might not be able to give you much more because we have to protect ourselves from China and Russia. So you have a situation where they're destroyed through saturation just simply because they don't have the surface area. And Iran is destroyed then by a nuke, which destroys all those Gulf states in between, which also makes sense why they were lobbying very hard to get it to end immediately as well. So you were looking about at a mutually assured destruction across the Middle East. And I think that's why everybody sat down and signed it and beat their chest afterward. But truthfully, I don't see a way that that would have worked out for Iran or for Israel or for the US if that continued. So I think that is the reason why it only went those 12 days and everybody quickly jumped to the table at the end of that. And even if they can't come to a good deal, they just were like, all right, we can at least stop the fighting. And I think that's crucial, the quiet part that nobody really talks about with that war.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. Yeah, if that just went on, it wouldn't have been good for anybody there. I mean, who knows what that could have turned into? I think it could have turned into just like a huge drone war in the Middle East, like once they ran out of missiles. But yeah, and you mentioned the Samson option. That is always something to keep in mind here. It's something people always forget, that Israel does have nukes. And if they really are being hit hard by Iran and there's not really any way out of it, that's certainly a real option for them. And I think it's something that they use to try to get the U.S. to be involved. They say, hey, if you don't help us, we're going to have to, drop our nukes on them. So, yeah, hopefully this whole thing blows over, but it's just things aren't looking good at the moment.
We know you have to go, but I want to ask you one very last important question. Do you see any link between this American aggression throughout the world and what's happening in Minneapolis and other democratic cities in the United States? Is there a link between the extreme violence that we're all of a sudden seeing against our own citizens?
Oh yeah, I think so, and I think it's part of the same attitude, like this expansionism and intervention overseas, and kind of sending in these armed feds into these cities and behaving, just cutting them loose the way that they do. And it's clearly meant to be provocative. I think they're trying to create conflict, and so they can crack down further. The way that they handle this stuff with their memes, and the way that they handled that shooting, just immediately calling her a domestic terrorist, not even saying there should be an investigation or anything.
Well,
So,
they didn't
yeah,
investigate the victim. To be fair, they're investigating the victim and trying to bring
right.
charges against
Yeah.
her partner.
Yeah, that's right. But my point is, when it first happened, the fact that like they all just immediately said, what they said. What's her name? The Kristi Noem. I mean, it's just despicable stuff. No matter what you think about what happened, just for them to immediately say domestic terrorists, completely back this guy, because that's just going to embolden them more. And I think, you see these videos all day of people confronting them and the way that they handle people. I think it's just a matter of time before another horrific incident happens.
Well, they seem to be justifying it in the sense that violence is allowed against people on the left. Do you think that there's a strategy behind that, specifically leading up to the midterm elections?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, are they trying to make it? Is this part of a power grab, like a bigger power grab that they want to try to keep Trump in power or something? I don't know. I think this is all going to really backfire on them in a huge way when the Democrats take power, which I think they're going to crush the midterms. And I doubt that J.D. Vance is going to win. You know, I mean, it's a long way away. So it's impossible to predict. But if things keep going the way they're going, I don't see J.D. Vance winning in 2028.
Did you not put stock in all the fears that there's not going to be fair elections ever again that a lot of people keep talking about? Does that seem like fear-mongering to you, conspiracy theories, or do you think there's some basis to that?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not really that worried about that at the moment, but you never know. I mean, like, I just don't know exactly what they could do, you know, if they wanted to rig the election in some way.
Yeah, there's no clear path from here to there.
Yeah.
For me, the thing about that whole thing is it does seem like fear mongering simply because, like, the age of Trump. Like, if Trump was 60 or so, then that would be like, Trump is 80
true.
something
He's old,
now,
yeah.
isn't he? Like, he's going to be term limited by death eventually.
Yeah, but he
Like,
has
he's
an heir
old,
apparent.
you know, and that's what I'm saying. He's eating McDonald's his whole life. It's not like he's the picture of fitness either.
We have a clear heir to him, though, and he's very young. Once there was an heir apparent, that changed.
Yeah, it's true.
In Israel, Netanyahu never appointed an heir apparent, and Trump did, which means that he's thinking of the future of his movement almost instinctively in a way that a lot of other dictators hesitate to do because they're worried that the person they appoint will undermine their power. But here, Trump actually did it, which is surprising and meaningful, I think, and gives this movement more of an ability to destroy American democracy in the long term.
Well, on that note, I got to take off, but it was good talking to you guys.
Dave,
Oh, it
always
was
a
great
pleasure.
talking to
Thank
you
you for
again.
making time
I
for us.
appreciate you making time for us, man. I know you're
Yeah, of
really
course.
busy given all the things that are going on.
Yeah, hopefully there's no attack on Iran before this is posted.